Can I introduce myself? I'm Penny Sparke and I come from London. I work at Kingston University. And with my colleague Catherine McDermott, who you'll be seeing in the session this afternoon as the chair, the two of us have been working as co-curators on the exhibition, and we've contributed also essays to the book. So we've been part of this project for, I think, nearly five years or more, and so excited to see it culminate, and very excited to be here as part of the symposium. I'm here to chair this first session this morning, which will finish just by lunchtime. And I want to welcome you, all of you, warmly to it. And also I'd like to add my thanks to Michele, who gave us such a lovely introduction, I think, to his work, but also I think to some of the sensibilities of the period that we're going to be focusing on today. Design in Europe in the period 85 to 2005, which is our focus, is largely uncharted territory. I think we know a lot about the individuals, we know a lot about some of the exhibitions, we know about the companies. What we don't know is what was really happening in a sort of large framework. The period built upon four post-war decades, which saw second wave architectural and design modernism challenged in the 60s by pop and anti-design, the experiments that took place in Britain, Italy, and elsewhere in Europe. So there were two big monolithic things happening in that post-45 period. And I think the kind of tensions, or perhaps complementarities, depending on how we want to think of it, that were put in place in those 40 years provide the framework that influences the period that we're really focusing on in those last 2 decades of the 20th century. I think the 70s were very key. In many ways, they were years of turbulence, brought about by the oil crisis, what postmodern theorists have called the end of history, and things like that. They were a strange decade. But I think looking back, it can be seen that it was kind of a confused interlude between something quite definite and something new, but also a very important formative period. And I think it's interesting that Michele began by showing us some work from the late 70s, because I think the fermentation of ideas in that decade was very, very crucial to what happened. And as he showed us, Memphis coming in 1981 was very much the sort of end of that 70th period and the beginning of something new, and of course the backcloth to what we're talking about today. So the years after the mid-80s were complex, pluralistic, and accepting years where design was concerned, I think. I think building upon modernism, looking back at it, reinterpreting it, revaluing it, interpreting ways in which it looked, sat alongside lots of variations of means by which that zeitgeist was challenged. And I think when you see the exhibition, you'll see that very, very clearly. So that's really, very briefly, the kind of intellectual and historical framework for this morning's session. But we're focusing on designing in this session, the work of designers. How did they respond, really, to that framework? Were they aware of it? Were they working with it? Were they working against it? And I want to think about how different European countries rose to the challenges, and indeed continue to rise to the challenges of working in what is a very complex environment in contemporary Europe. Okay, that's really the little introduction, and we're going to organize the session as follows. We'll have 2 lectures, 35-minute lectures. Then we will have 2 shorter presentations by 2 panelists, and then we'll have a question and answer session. So that's the shape. And we're very, very lucky to have with us today 4 very preeminent designers from different countries in Europe. And I'm going to say some very brief words about them. You have in your small catalogue here, again, rather abbreviated CVs, but I think important ones that show the sort of impressive list of designs they've worked with, the companies they've worked with, the prizes they've won, etc. So I'm not going to repeat that. What I will do is introduce very briefly the 2 speakers, and then I'll come up again and introduce the 2 panelists. The first speaker is the Swedish designer Eero Koivisto, a member of the partnership Claesson Koivisto Rune, and the second speaker, I'll introduce both together because they'll follow directly on each other, is the French designer Sylvain Dubuisson, who set up his own design company in the late 70s and who's worked across a wide range of design media, right through from architecture to glass. As I say, I won't say any more about them. I'll allow them to speak for themselves because that's what they're going to be doing. But I'd like to give them both a very warm welcome. And if Eero, you'd like to come to the podium first.